Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History Spiritual Quest. We're into chapter 11 of the book of John, fourth book of the New Testament, and the Impersonal Life by Joseph Benner. And today we're going to open with a song. Hi, Gun, thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. When you are walking the spiral, sometimes when you lose control and you start to spiral away, sometimes you have to trust in motion, and that's the name of this song.
Radio static, Memphis bound, WABQ homes a sacred sound. Green, green grass, again and again. A DJ's risk for a loyal friend. Elvis smiles, no words exchanged, just a test of love on a range. Keys in the dark, showroom glow, a Cadillac waits in a silent show. Merry Christmas, GK said, a yellow chariot, tears on shade. What's fame and fortune worth, my friend, if it's not something we can lend? The Chevy Impala, still shining new, passed from Klein to the Circle G crew. Gary Pepper wheels instead of race, rolled the road with Elvis in his face. Sterling drove it, errands and guard, a father's devotion, quiet and hard. He couldn't walk, but he moved the crowd. Fancy twisted, but faintness allowed. No colors filtered, no machine spin, just kept his truth from deep within. A house still burning, a pen like flame, a heart that never saw it flame. He's in the dark, guess that road from Cadillac dreams to a humble home. Elvis gave money, chrome and steel. He gave his friends a way to feel. What's fame and fortune, what can you see, if it's not shedding loyalty?
Thank you all for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And now let's listen to one of those echoes of a spiral that spirals us back into the visual delight of this comic book presentation of the Gospels. And this is the story of Lazarus. So many people might already be familiar with this story from the Bible. It's one of the most famous. And it says, a certain man, Lazarus, the brother of Mary and Martha, is sick. His sisters send word to Jesus. Jesus is going around this geographic area And one of the miracles that he performs over and over is healing. And so the sisters of this dying brother, who's extremely sick, they send for Jesus. And in this panel, he whom thou lovest is sick. And I believe that's Jesus talking to whoever's brought him the news about Lazarus. Or it could be the other person telling Jesus, you know this man Lazarus, and you love him, and he is sick. That might be what's going on here. In this style of comic book, they don't have the bubble that tells you which person is talking in a picture. So to me, that sometimes becomes confusing. And it almost leaves this open to that this could be being said either way. Now, obviously, the story tells it one way. And this says, after 2 days, Judea says, let us go, or Jesus says, let us go into Judea again. And one of the disciples says, but Master, the Jews tried to stone you. I believe that's where Lazarus is. I think he's in Judea. And so Jesus has been told that his friend is sick, and now he's trying to make his way back to him. There's a woman in this picture. I believe that's a woman. Maybe that's just an unshaven man. They fooled me with that in this comic book before. And you can see a multi-story building in the background, so they're obviously around civilization somewhere. And in this panel, it says, Lazarus is dead. Nevertheless, let us go unto him. And I think that's the gentleman on the right is telling that to Jesus. Or maybe Jesus is saying it. Again, there's no bubble here to tell us which person is talking. But so it's not clear whether Jesus just knows that Lazarus is gone or if he's receiving word that Lazarus is gone. Now, this comic book was printed in 1942. Elvis would have been 7 years old. Can't guarantee Elvis would have seen this comic book, but he did like comic books. And this is the kind of comic book adults might have kept around, and one of the ones that might have lasted through every comic book purge. So there might have been times where this was the only comic book available. And if Elvis did not experience this comic book, he may have experienced other similar teaching aids in church, something that presages Sunday school. I don't think they had Sunday school when Elvis went to church, but they would have probably had somebody that sat with the kids and tried to talk to them at their level a little bit. I had some older relatives that did that, and one had this beautiful felt board. And the felt board was printed with a scene that looked like one of the scenes from this comic book in terms of the cities in the background and the geographic area. It had some trees from and some bushes and other plants like that, and like a small pond or something in one area. And then she had these felt figures, and they were of all these people that we've been looking at in these comic books. And then she would stick them up onto the felt. I played with a toy that was called Color Forms when I was a kid, and it used plastic pieces onto a smooth board, and they would stick there by their own adhesion. Then you could peel them off and put them back on. So that I think they were a vinyl sticker. So they didn't actually have any adhesive. They just stuck by their own physical properties. The felt did the same thing. It was like an early Color Forms kind of set. And she would tell all the stories that we've looked at in these comic books from moving those felt characters around. And of course, us kids, we were fascinated. Now, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have cell phones. We only had a few television stations. We were usually brought to church by our parents and didn't especially want to be there. And yet she was able to capture all of our attention with this felt board. And it just always, the comic book reminds me of her and the way she would tell us those stories. And her felt characters were very colorful, just like the ones in this panel, which says, Thomas says, let us also go that we may die with him. And so Thomas, I think, is one of the disciples, and he's saying the Jews are going to capture Jesus and kill him because they've already tried to do that. And if they kill him, I'd just as soon die with him. And so let us go, and maybe we can protect him, or at least we will fall before him. Something like that. It's an expression of loyalty towards Jesus. And in this panel, it says, when they come, they find out that Lazarus has been dead 4 days. So it looks like in the earlier panel, Jesus just felt that Lazarus was dead, and now it's been confirmed, and it's been several days. Now, in a time period like this, long before they practiced the type of funeral things that we do, like morticians and embalming and all of that, that meant Lazarus would have been in very, very poor shape after 4 days, no matter what they had done in this time period. And in the next panel, it says, when Martha hears that Jesus is coming, she runs to meet him. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, whatever you ask of God will be given. So Martha comes out and she starts by hurling her grief at Jesus. But then she affirms that even in her grief, she still has faith in him. That she both blames him and has faith. And this is a lesson of alignment. This is like Peter getting out of the ship, walking on the water towards Jesus, and he starts to sink because he loses his faith halfway there. But he remains oriented. He slips, but he immediately realigns by calling out for help, and Jesus saves him. She's doing the exact same thing. She's saying that I'm having trouble seeing you through the grief. But she says that she knows that she wants to see him. And then she says, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. So she reaffirms her faith again that the grief is temporary and the separation is temporary. So Joseph Benner might say, this is a message of unity, that she's recognizing and proclaiming the eternity of unity, that unity is the state of all things, and that it's her perception while she is here that she is separated. But they're all going to be together again because Lazarus will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. And Jesus affirms, thy brother shall rise again. And he says, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And Jesus is reaffirming to Martha that her statement is correct. And not only will they all be together again, but they'll be with Jesus because Jesus is the resurrection and the life. That he is death and life. He is all things. He is unity. And that her faith is well placed. And in this panel, Martha runs to her sister, Mary, and she says, the master has come and calls for you. And this panel shows that Mary is in tremendous grief. She's crying. She's got a cloth to wipe her tears. She's been crying for a while, probably 4 days. Martha's heart is lifted, and she runs to Mary, who she knows is suffering. You could say, if you looked at this like Joseph Benner, that Martha is expressing her divine attribute. Jesus, who is the Christ, who is the light, has just imbued Martha with love, which is also Jesus, the Holy Spirit. And that is the power to express the divine attribute, which for Martha expresses as some form of compassion for her sister. An attempt to communicate with her sister to relieve her suffering. And she's saying, Mary, I found the answer. Not as bad as we thought it was. And in this panel, the mourners think Mary is going to the tomb to weep, but follow her. So Mary hears what Martha has to say. She receives the love that Martha expresses to her, the transmission from Jesus directly. It's come through Martha. And Mary reorients through her own grief, and she goes out. And the others who've seen her weeping and know that she is sad believe that her sadness continues. But she comes to Jesus and gets on her knees. And obviously, he's giving her his blessing. So he is again transmitting love, light, illumination to Mary. He is removing her interference with the I am, as Joseph Benner would say. And Elizabeth said Martha had so much faith that she believed and had so much faith. And now Mary, I don't think she ever did not have faith, but her lantern has been brightened. At least enough to find Jesus. And then he's taking care of the rest. He says, "Where have ye laid him?" And mourners say, "Could not this man who opened the eyes of the blind have kept Lazarus from dying?" So there are others around Martha and Mary, and they too grieve for Lazarus, and they hurl their grief at Jesus. But if you'll notice in the picture, they're all looking at Jesus. Now they're also looking at Mary. They've followed Mary to Jesus. She had the lantern. They were in the fog of grief. They could not see Jesus's lantern, but they could see Mary. They misinterpreted Mary's lantern. They thought that she continued in grief like they did. But she had the brightest lantern, so they followed her, and they followed her to Jesus. And now that they can see Jesus, they repeat the pattern that Martha started, which is they hurl their grief at Jesus. Now, they haven't stated the faith part, but they've already borrowed part of Mary's faith just to get here. And Elizabeth says she said that wrong, but the idea, I don't think you said it wrong at all, Elizabeth. She had a tremendous amount of faith, and that is what kept her lantern bright. And even through her own fog, she could still see the correct direction. And Jesus is not angry that she has the fog or that she tells him she has the fog. When she hurls her grief at Jesus, she's telling him there's so much fog in the way. And now they've reached the tomb of Lazarus. And Jesus says, "Take away the stone." Now, a young Elvis, or even an older one, might have been fascinated by this particular panel because it shows a tomb. And it's not any kind of tomb that I'm personally familiar with. I doubt there's many of us here who are personally familiar with this. If you are, if this is the way tombs are where you live, let us know. If you have a relative that might be buried in a tomb like this, let us know. But this is an above ground tomb. It's almost like a small hill, and a doorway's been cut in the side. And then there's a room inside, and that doorway can be sealed off with a large round stone, something like a millstone that you can roll back and forth. It's very heavy, so it takes great strength or multiple people So hopefully that would keep others out of the tomb. Now, when you look at something like a pyramid in Egypt, that's the same thing that we're looking at here, only it's very structured. It's left the natural part that we see here that looks like a hill. And now it's a man made, you could think of possibly perfect or ideal hill or mountain, as the case may be. But even the largest pyramid is just kind of a big hill. And in this scene, they're rolling the stone away, and you can see it takes 5 men, 2 with large sticks, and 3 who use their bodily strength directly against the stone. And Jesus says, "Did I not say that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So I've got to assume that these 5 men are mourners. And even though they have just told Jesus that kind of his fault that Lazarus is dead, they still have the faith to open the tomb. So Jesus doesn't hold anything against these men that they hurled any of their grief at him. Their posture and orientation was correct. And he's going to include them in seeing the glory of God. And he's confirming that they do believe that even though they said it's his fault, that he knows they believe. And the doors rolled away, and Jesus prays and then says, "Lazarus, come forth." And Lazarus appears in the tomb of the door, or the door of the tomb. Martha and Mary are with Jesus, and they behold this miracle, as well as these men who opened the tombstone, but you cannot see them in this particular panel. This panel shows Lazarus and his sisters. They're taking off the wrappings, his funeral wrappings, his burial wrappings. Time to bring him fully back to the land of the living. And they are assisting with that particular burden. And it says, many of the Jews, friends of Mary and Martha and Lazarus, now believe on Jesus. Seeing this miracle has strengthened the flames of many lanterns. That these friends of Mary and Martha and Lazarus, they were sharing the faith of Mary and Martha and Lazarus. It's not just Mary and Martha's faith, Lazarus had faith as well. Even though he was dead, as Jesus had said. And the others were guiding themselves through the lanterns of these 3. And these 3 have now said that this man is who we're looking at to get our lantern. You can follow him directly. And then Jesus confirms that, yes, you can follow me. And now everybody in this circle is oriented on Jesus. But others go to Jerusalem and tell the Pharisees what has happened. And we can see the Pharisees and a person there telling them, person who's fearful. Their fear has misaligned their intention. They want to keep their friends religiously safe. People don't come back from the dead. The religious authorities need to be brought in. Hi, Mark. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. I don't think I've seen you in chat before, so welcome. And you're saying that I mentioned yesterday I grew up around Indianapolis and that you grew up in Beech Grove. I do remember Beech Grove, although I didn't spend much time in that part. And you're saying you saw Elvis in Indianapolis, Bloomington, and Evansville, Chicago. I'm assuming in Indianapolis you saw him at Market Square Arena. Is that correct? And what years did you see him in Indianapolis, in Bloomington, and Evansville? I'd be very interested to know. I'm sure it was the 1970s, right? But you can confirm. But that is extremely interesting. And Elizabeth says that you are lucky. Absolutely. I never did get to see Elvis in person, but, I wasn't very old when he passed away. Mark's saying that he shook hands with him in Fort Wayne in October 1976. That's awesome. That is exactly the same month that we've been covering in the other series about the phone call with Red West that was recorded. That's October 12th, 1976. So as you shook his hand, now you know what was going on, either right after or right before that you did. And Elizabeth says that's amazing and beautiful. And Gunn says, lucky Mark. So we've got this frightened man, or maybe he has other reasons for going to tell the Pharisees. Maybe he expects some kind of reward. Maybe it's a mixture of multiple reasons. But you don't have to be a bad person to go and tell the religious authorities that someone raised a man from the dead. So I think we've got to have compassion for this guy. And I think we've got to have compassion for the Pharisees who hear this. Because they're going to find out it's true. And how do you reconcile that? I mean, this man is back from the dead. Now, Jesus has already raised people from the dead. But this one's been gone for 4 days. The others could have been mistaken beliefs by the people around them. It's not completely unheard of that people have passed away and sometime within a day or so, maybe 2 days, have come back. Things like comas that they wouldn't have understood in this time period. Things that mimicked death. Later on in the Middle Ages, or really like the 19th century, they would bury people that were not truly dead. And the people became so frightened about it, they started building special kinds of coffins that you could signal that you were still alive in there if you woke up inside this coffin. So that's not completely unheard of and might not truly be a miracle, although it's really weird. But 4 days. This is world shattering to all of these individuals who witness this, or who even hear about it, or confirm it like these Pharisees are going to. And Mark says 1972 at the Fairgrounds Coliseum. Oh, that's cool. Oh, Market Square Arena in 77. The Convention Center in 74. You were at the last performance, the Market Square Arena, June 1970, I think it's June 26th, 1977. That is amazing. And Elizabeth says that this man might have just been excited and just wanted to let it out. Yeah, they draw him a little bit evil in the picture because he's got kind of a pointy chin and pointy nose, and um, he has some gestures that appear uh, like he might have some bad intentions. But I think that you're right that a person might have just been so excited they wanted to share it with their religious leaders. The Christ is here. I have seen him. You've got to come and feel this for yourself. That is absolutely a possibility. It doesn't require any misalignment. It's simply the path that God intended. That's a great point. And in this panel, it says they call a council. That's the Pharisees. We can see there's a group of them here. At least 8, but there's another set of hands, maybe 9. Perhaps more we can't see in the panel. They say, what shall we do? If we let him alone, all men will believe on him, and the Romans will take away both our place and nation. So there's been a tension between the Pharisees and Jesus ever since these stories started. Ever since Jesus first began performing miracles. Now you might see a resonance with Elvis here. Not that Elvis is Jesus or Jesus is Elvis, but Jesus's life has a reflection of all of our lives. And that's why he's been given to us as the greatest example. And when Jesus begins performing, that tension begins immediately and grows tighter and tighter. When Elvis begins performing, exactly the same pattern emerges. For Elvis, it's not about religious faith, although they use that as a weapon against him. It's about entertainment. Something a lot of people would think of as frivolous. But if it's so frivolous, why were people attacking him so viciously? Now, Jesus is talking about the most important thing. So there's no equity between what Elvis is doing and what Jesus is doing, but the pattern is the same. The spiral is exactly the same. And that is what God means when he says that we were made in his image. It's not just a physical thing, it's the patterns of our lives are shaped after the patterns of God. But here in this passage, on this comic book panel, the Pharisees are finally plucking the one single note on the string that reveals all of the truth behind their portion of the tension. Which is that if men believe in Christ, the Romans, who are the secular authority of the time, will take away the religious authority of the Pharisees, but worse, they will enslave the nation, the people. So the Pharisees are not bad people. They're not the villains of the story. They are wolves in a sense, but they're also shepherds. They're wolves in the sense that the way they're interpreting the scriptures and their own actions and statements are helping others misalign. or they're casting more fog between the divine shards that they shepherd and the I am, as Joseph Bitter would say. At the same time, they are shepherding their flock, their sheepfold. And this man is a threat to the sheepfold in multiple ways, even if he is telling the truth. That he's talking about an eternity in unity, things that happen after you die, and they're trying to take care of the people here before they die. And if they allow Jesus to move forward, they fear that the Romans are going to kill many of their flock, that they are going to destroy the sheepfold, that they will scatter the sheep, and that ultimately the spiritual lives of these people will flounder and they will not reach whatever reward they're supposed to have. So their fear isn't baseless. It has a lot of mortal and secular components to it, which Joseph Benner would all say are all part of the fog of misalignment, many different layers that are diffusing the light and making it hard to see where it comes from. But it's also showing that these filters, they're necessary to survive here. We can't just throw them away. If these men throw them away, there are many innocents who are going to suffer. And now Cappius, and I don't know that I'm pronouncing that correctly, the high priest, this is the man with the most secular responsibility for the religious well-being of his sheepfold. That is a very difficult place to be. He's trying to balance the life that we live at this moment and that all these people must live. And he's trying to prevent true physical harm and suffering from coming to his people. The Romans are brutal and harsh when you cross them. And so if they decide they've got to exercise more power, it will not be an easy exercise of power. And Cappius decides it is necessary for us that one man should die for the nation to save the rest. This is a way of saying the good of the many outweighs the good of the few or the one. This is what a shepherd has to do. You cannot keep an infected sheep with the flock because he will infect everybody. You can't take the time to understand the infection or that it might not even be an infection because the symptoms are so in your face that you have to do something now before someone else sees and they take an action. That's what this high priest doesn't, he does not want the Romans to decide that the priest can't handle this, and then they will use that as the reason to take over. And people shall suffer. Many, many, many people. And so, therefore, Jesus, he's got to go. Has to be eliminated. Not because he is not the Son of God, not because he did anything on the Sabbath like they've been after him about, but because other people are going to suffer if he doesn't. They're also putting some blame on Jesus for this, that he's aware of the political situation in his time period. He knows that he's pushing these boundaries. He's brought this on himself. It is necessary for us. And so the high priest gathers his flock together. And he says, we're doing this for us, for the best, for all of us. And Elizabeth says that she never looked at it that way before, but she understands that. And that's another good point. The way that you looked at it before isn't wrong. It's also there. The scriptures, this comic book that reflects the scriptures, the impersonal life, the prophet, they're all written in layers. And that's what Elvis emulates. So there are multiple readings to all of these items. Mine aren't correct. Mine are just one reading. If it resonates with you, that's where you feel the connection to the I am. If it doesn't resonate, then this isn't the right lesson. It's not the right bringing of the word. It's not what you need at that time. But that's why people keep reading the Bible over and over and over, because it says something different every time you look at it, depending on where you're at in your spiral of life. But none of them are ever wrong. Benner makes that clear over and over, that each is a building block to the next place, that we can't be who we are if we don't have our experiences. But now the Pharisees from this day, they take counsel how to put Jesus to death. They are united in purpose. And so the sheepfold does reflect a mini unity. And that's not bad. Now they're twisting this to put Jesus to death because they fear. They have intense fear. And they are therefore, as Benner would say, misaligned. They cannot see through their fog where the light is coming from. They do believe in the light. They absolutely believe. They have faith. They just have too much fog. And that brings us to the end of that part of the comic. We'll be going into a new area in the next one. And now we're looking at another Cubist painting. It's very similar to the one that we looked at yesterday. This is another one that I've created with the AI. The beauty of most of the AIs is that they like to give you two things when you ask for one. So if you ask for a picture, they'll give you two pictures. And this is actually an amazing strategy by the AI that, if you understand it, is really good to adopt when you need people to make a choice. So if I just showed this picture to you, just this one, like I'm doing right now, and I say, do you like this picture or do you not? 90% of people will find a reason not to like the picture and say no. It's just the way we are. Do you like this particular dish that I'm serving you in this restaurant? Well, 80%ish. Somebody might, look at it like that. It doesn't become a yes or no. People graduate that particular experience. But if you give them two and you say, hey, here's a bowl of vanilla ice cream and here's a bowl of chocolate ice cream, which one do you prefer? Well, they're going to pick one, but they've already agreed implicitly that they like both. Because you already set it up that way when you showed it to them. That's what the AI is doing. It's, which one of these two pictures do you prefer? And so it's just a great lesson in how you approach people. But I also thought this was a great picture. So I am showing it to you. It's very similar to the one from yesterday. And it has a lot of different sayings and verses that were important to Elvis. Now, it's not quoting the verses correctly. It does have like John 3 in a lot of places or John 1, but it's a cubist representation. So it's mixing all of these things together. Now, the one I really like says, "E still and know I am God," because it's normally "be still and know I am God." But here it's shortened to E, which is really an error of the AI or a cubist representation of B, possibly. But now it says Elvis still and know I am God, because some people did call him E. And Charlie confirmed for us yesterday, Charlie Hodge, that Elvis typically signed notes either E or EP. So E, still, and know I am God. And it says life and only closed in death, which is a mishmash of something that he said, that Elvis said. And then it says God is always there for us. God is a living presence in all of us. So what's interesting is the part that's probably hardest to understand. Well, it mishmashed all that, but it got this underlying basis, which it put underneath the mishmash part. It said, God is always there for us. God is a living presence in us all. That is the basis that Elvis builds on. And the AI has reflected that in this part of the painting. There's only one thing that's written in red, kind of an orangish red. It says, trust in the Lord, not man. And over top and under it, it says Elvis Presley. So it like brackets, trust in the Lord, not man. That was his base and his aspiration. And then above the top Elvis Presley, it again says, trust in the Lord, not man. This is important. Now, true, I fed in what I felt were important things that Elvis said, but I fed in a lot of them. You know, like as many as it would hold before it wouldn't accept the entry, because they'll only let you put so much in. So I just found that to be an interesting output. If you like it, let me know. Put it in the comments and in the chat. I am still going to post these things so you guys can access them, but I did run into a problem with the YouTube post. They limit me in size, so you can't get the whole painting. So I'm thinking of a workaround, and hopefully I'll have that thought up in the next day or so. Now, we don't really have enough time to look at this, but this is another page from the Prophet that Elvis gave to Ed Parker. And it specifically talks about a singer. And it's a bunch of stuff that we've seen Elvis write before. So this is where we're going in the next episode. But we're going to wrap it up for now. And I want to thank each and every one of you for sharing your time here with me. I greatly appreciate it. And Elizabeth says she likes it when it says illumination brings knowledge, which was, I think, the one we looked at yesterday. Although it might have been, was it on this one again? Yeah, right at the top. Illumination brings knowledge. And I'm hoping that's what I do here. I don't know that I have any knowledge to bring, but I'm hoping I illuminate something and that it resonates with you. So if it does, put it in the comments or hit the like button. Make sure you're subscribed so that you won't miss the next episode, which is going to be at 3 p.m. today, every day, 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to be looking more at Red West, his recorded phone call with Elvis Presley. You all keep on taking care of business. This is Trust in Motion.
Radio static, Memphis bound, WABQ homes a sacred sound. Green, green grass, again and again. A DJ's risk for a loyal friend. Elvis smiles, no words exchanged, just a test of love on a range. Keys in the dark, showroom glow, a Cadillac waits in a silent show. Merry Christmas, GK said, a yellow chariot, tears on shade. What's fame and fortune worth, my friend, if it's not something we can lend? The Chevy Impala, still shining new, passed from blind to the circle